He shouldn't have been there, but the river didn't care. A German Shepherd puppy lay on a floating mat of roots and sticks, a little black and tan life in the brown churn of the Willamette in Eugene, Oregon. He saw me first and didn't bark. Just those eyes, wide and calm like he'd already spent every last sound. 3 months old, all ribs and courage, a tiny shepherd pup trying to be braver than the water. The afternoon sun bounced off the surface and made the whole scene look harsher, too bright for a small dog that had been living on scraps. He pressed his paws into the slick net of branches as if he could anchor the world with nothing but hope. My name is Jack Turner, and I was just supposed to be checking trail debris. But this wasn't debris. This was a stranded pup, a young dog, a rescued puppy, waiting to happen. Wind dragged the river's skin sideways, and the little island wobbled like a breath about to break. He didn't whine. He didn't shake. He held himself like a brave pup who'd learned that stillness sometimes keeps you alive. I crouched at the bank and felt the cold through my boots. "Hey, buddy," I said, useless words that were really for me. The shepherd dog blinked, then lifted his nose and tasted the air like he was choosing to believe I was real. Black and tan, soaked and stubborn, he looked like a small ember pretending to be a fire. The current tugged hard at snagged branches and carried plastic and leaves past him. The river's fast, blunt language. He ignored the chaos and stared back at me like we were the only 2 points that mattered. I thought about how a stray pup learns to survive by eating what the streets leave behind. How a young puppy hardens without growing mean. Who left you, little canine? Who taught you to wait so quietly? He didn't answer, of course, because dogs don't speak with words, and this one spoke with a spine made of trying. Hondo, I told him, because a name is a rope. The pup tilted his head as if a new word had built a small bridge between two lonely shores. The floating island bobbed, a warning I could feel in my knees. I slid my jacket off and wrapped it over my arm. Not for me, but for that small dog who deserved to be warm again. The river smelled like mud and metal and unfinished storms. Hondo watched me without blinking, as if blinking might cost him time. I took one step down the rocks, then another, gravel rolling under my soles. The Willamette pressed its cold hands against my shins and made me feel very breakable. I couldn't promise him anything except this. I would not walk away. I stepped into the current and felt it shove back, and I moved anyway, keeping my eyes on the little shepherd who had already chosen to trust. The current pulls were stronger than I thought. By the second step, my jeans were soaked, and the river's weight pinned my legs like wet stone. I'm 45, not 20, and my knees reminded me of it fast. But there he was, that German Shepherd puppy clinging to his mess of roots, eyes fixed on me like he'd already decided I was his only chance. "Easy, Hondo," I muttered, even though the current swallowed most of the words. A branch cracked somewhere downstream and startled him. The pup shifted, nearly sliding into the water, claws scraping wood, that soft whimper. God, that sound! I've heard storms tear roofs off cabins, but nothing hits like a frightened pup fighting to stay alive. I pushed forward, feeling rocks vanish under my boots. The cold bit through everything, slicing up my legs. Every step closer, Hondo's stare locked tighter on me, not begging, not panicking, just waiting. He didn't cry for help. He just believed I'd get there. That kind of quiet faith can undo you. When I reached the edge of his floating island, the current lunged, trying to spin us both away. I dropped to one knee, reached out slow. "Come here, buddy," I said, voice shaking more than the water. Hondo hesitated, nose twitching, and then that trembling paw, light as a leaf, touched my wrist. The roots groaned under our combined weight. I didn't breathe, just scooped him fast, pressed him against my chest, and turned back toward the shore. He was lighter than I expected, all bones and wet fur, a little furnace of heartbeat against me. He didn't struggle, didn't bite, just pressed his face under my chin, trusting a stranger with everything he had left. Each step felt longer, the current pulling harder now that I carried this tiny life. I slipped once, almost went under, and he whimpered again, that small broken sound that makes you keep fighting even when you're done. The mud sucked at my boots, my breath burned, but I kept going, the pup's heartbeat steady against me. When my foot finally hit solid ground, I didn't even notice the cuts on my hands or the cold climbing my ribs. All I saw was him, safe, shivering, but alive. His fur clung to my jacket, his tail barely twitching, like he wasn't sure if happiness was allowed yet. I sank to my knees on the riverbank, holding him tighter than I probably should have. Hondo's head rested in the crook of my arm, his small chest rising and falling against my palm. The river roared behind us, but I could finally hear him breathing. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then his tail lifted once, slow, weak, but enough. And that tiny flick of life told me this rescue was only the beginning. He was shaking so hard I could feel it through the fabric of my jacket. Not the kind of tremor that comes from cold. This was fear wearing a heartbeat. The German Shepherd puppy pressed himself into me like he was trying to disappear inside the warmth. I whispered nonsense, the kind of words you say when you're out of better ideas. Easy, Hondo. You're okay, buddy. You're safe now. I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. The Willamette behind us kept roaring, angry that we'd escaped. I'm Jack Turner, 45, and I've seen floods, wildfires, animals, and every kind of mess. But this little shepherd pup, he got under my skin in seconds. He didn't cry. He didn't bark. He just stared, eyes glassy and too grown for his age. A dog shouldn't have eyes like that. I took off my flannel, wrapped him tighter, felt his breath against my arm, uneven, shallow, but still fighting. My truck was parked half a mile up the trail, and that walk felt longer than any rescue I've done. Hondo's head rested against my chest the whole time. Every few steps he'd twitch like a pup dreaming, but he was awake, too tired to move, too scared to sleep. I could feel every bone in him through his wet fur. He weighed maybe 20 pounds, and somehow it felt like carrying the whole world. When I reached the truck, I set him on the seat, turned the heater on full blast. He curled into a ball, nose between his paws, trembling under the towel I found in the back. I dug through a paper bag, found a granola bar, broke off a corner just to see if he'd take it. He sniffed it, then looked up at me, unsure. I laughed, voice cracking more than I wanted. Yeah, I know, not exactly steak, huh? He took it after a moment, chewed slow, like he was remembering what food even was. That one bite, that tiny sound of him swallowing, I swear it felt louder than the rain on the windshield. I started the engine, turned us toward town. The road blurred, but not from the weather. Every time I glanced over, that small dog was still watching me. Cautious, silent, but alive. I didn't know what waited ahead. Vet bills, sleepless nights, maybe heartbreak. But as his head finally dropped onto my lap, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't letting him go. By the time we reached home, Hondo was half asleep in the passenger seat, his tiny chest rising in shaky rhythm. I carried him inside like a piece of glass that might break if I breathed wrong. The German Shepherd puppy barely stirred when I set him on a blanket near the heater. His paws twitched once, maybe from a dream, maybe from leftover fear. The room smelled like coffee and wet fur, two things I've weirdly grown used to over the years. I sat down on the floor beside him, boots still soaked, knees stiff, feeling every one of my 45 years. He looked so small in that space, like the world had been built too big for him. When I reached out to touch his ear, he flinched, not from pain, but from memory. That's the part people don't tell you about rescues. It's not the wounds you see that take the longest to heal. He didn't move when I laid a towel across him, but I could feel the heat of his tiny heartbeat through the fabric. Every breath he took sounded like it had to be convinced to stay. I whispered, "You're all right, Hondo. You made it, little shepherd." Maybe I said it for both of us. The truth is, saving lives doesn't make you fearless. It just teaches you how to move while you're still scared. I made him a small bowl of warm water, set it beside him. He stared at it for a full minute before daring a sip. It was the slowest, most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. When he finished, he looked up, not with fear, but confusion, like he didn't understand kindness yet. I smiled, though my throat burned. "Yeah," I said quietly. "That's what care feels like." The night outside was quiet except for the hum of the heater. I leaned against the wall and watched him drift towards sleep, his ears twitching at sounds only he could hear. That German Shepherd puppy had already survived more than most grown men I know. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't thinking about the rescue itself. I was thinking about what comes after. Because saving him was just step one. Teaching him how to live again, that was going to take everything I had. By morning, the house smelled like damp towels and river water. I'd slept on the floor beside him, or maybe just pretended to. Every time that German Shepherd puppy shifted, I opened my eyes to make sure he was still breathing. Hondo looked better in the daylight, less ghost, more dog, but still fragile enough to break under a strong wind. I'm Jack Turner, 45, and I've done a lot of rescues in my time. But nothing makes you feel smaller than watching life rebuild itself one heartbeat at a time. He lifted his head when I moved, blinking slow, like each motion took planning. "Morning, pal," I said. We made it through the night. He blinked again, maybe believing me, maybe just too tired to argue. I warmed up some chicken broth, thinned it with water, and slid the bowl toward him. The smell caught him first. His nose twitched. Tail gave the faintest flick. A spark in a body running on fumes. He tried to stand, front paws wobbling, then collapsed halfway into the bowl. Didn't matter. He lapped at it anyway, desperate and clumsy, and I couldn't stop smiling through it. There's something about watching a young shepherd try to remember what hunger feels like that hits you right in the ribs. He drank too fast, coughed once, then licked the floor like he didn't want to waste a drop. I wiped his muzzle with the towel, and he didn't flinch this time. That tiny piece of trust, it's worth more than anything I've ever owned. Afterward, he crawled closer, half on my boot, half on the blanket, sighing like he'd been waiting his whole short life just to rest. I brushed my hand over his ear, and he didn't move away. The sound of the heater filled the silence between us, a soft rhythm that felt almost like breathing. I didn't realize how tight my chest had been until it finally loosened. He looked up once more, eyes heavy but calm, and let out the smallest yawn I've ever heard. It was ridiculous how much it undid me. That little pup, barely alive 12 hours ago, now safe enough to yawn in my house. And right then I understood. This wasn't about rescue anymore. It was about rebuilding a soul, one quiet breath at a time. By the second day, Hondo could finally stand on his own. His legs wobbled like twigs in the wind, but he didn't care. That German Shepherd puppy had a fighter's soul trapped inside a body, still learning what safety felt like. I watched him take 3 uncertain steps toward the window before collapsing in a heap of fur and stubborn pride. I'm Jack Turner, 45, and I've seen grown men give up easier than that pup did. He looked back at me, panting, waiting for some kind of reaction. I laughed softly and said, "You look ridiculous, buddy." His ears perked just a little. Maybe he liked the sound of someone teasing him instead of yelling. The heater hummed behind us, and sunlight crept across the floor like a promise. That morning, I called the local vet, told them I'd found a stray pup in bad shape. They squeezed me in before lunch. When I carried Hondo into the clinic, the nurse gasped, not because of the dirt or smell, but because of his eyes. Even under the harsh lights, that small shepherd dog looked noble, like he knew this place might decide his fate. He pressed against my chest when the thermometer came out, hiding his face like a shy kid. Dr. Myers, older guy, calm voice, ran a hand down Hondo's spine and frowned. "Severely underweight, dehydrated, but he's got a strong heart." He smiled at me. "So do you, apparently." I just shrugged. Truth was, I didn't feel strong. I felt terrified. Terrified that if I looked away for a second, this brave little pup might fade back into silence. They cleaned his ears, trimmed a cracked nail, gave him fluids. He didn't whine once, not even when the needle went in. He just stared at me. And I swear I could feel him asking, "Are you staying?" I nodded without meaning to, because there was no other answer. He'd already decided I was his anchor. When we got home, he trotted out of the carrier and stood for a full 5 seconds before sinking onto the rug. His tail twitched twice, slow but certain. It wasn't much, but it was everything. Because that tiny motion, that little flick of life, meant the world was finally starting to shift in his favor. That first week felt like holding my breath for days. Every sound Hondo made, a sneeze, a sigh, a whimper, sent my heart straight into my throat. The German Shepherd puppy was still too weak to bark, but he followed me with his eyes everywhere I went, as if afraid I'd vanish like everyone else before me. He didn't know I was already hooked, that leaving wasn't even an option anymore. I'm Jack Turner, 45, and I've lived alone long enough to forget what silence with purpose sounds like. Now the house had rhythm again. Tiny claws clicking on the floor, bowls clinking, that small dog breathing next to me while I worked at the table. He'd watch every move I made, head tilted, ears still uneven from the river's rough welcome. Each day he grew braver, but not louder. It was like he was relearning the rules of being alive. Slowly, carefully, one heartbeat at a time. He'd nap by the heater and twitch his paws in dreams, chasing something I couldn't see. Sometimes he'd wake up and just stare at me, tail making the smallest half circle, unsure if it was okay to be happy. I'd grin like an idiot every single time. "Yeah, it's okay, kid," I'd whisper. "You're safe here." And for a few seconds, that German Shepherd puppy would believe it. One morning, he decided to test the world. He followed me to the back door, ears high, tail moving for real this time. I opened it slowly, worried the wind or noise might spook him. But he stepped outside on his own, paws sinking into the damp grass, nose working overtime to take in every scent. For a moment, I just stood there watching this little survivor rediscover the world one breath at a time. He looked back at me once, that look dogs give when they're making sure you're still there, and then turned his gaze to the sky. His eyes caught the light, and for the first time, they didn't look scared, they looked curious. And in that tiny flicker of wonder, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Hope, alive, fragile, and standing on 4 wobbly legs in my backyard. The weather turned colder that week, and I noticed Hondo slowing down again. At first, I thought he was just tired. The German Shepherd puppy had been pushing himself, exploring every corner of the yard like it was new territory. But by evening, he wouldn't touch his food. He just curled up by the door, shivering, his tail still but his eyes watching me like he was trying not to worry me. I've seen a lot of strange things volunteering for rescues, but nothing prepares you for a sound like that. Soft, breaking, desperate. The way a pup breathes when something inside him hurts, but he doesn't know how to show it. I sat beside him on the floor, wrapped him in my jacket again, whispering, "You're all right, buddy. You're all right." But I knew he wasn't. At 45, I've learned that silence can scream louder than words. And that night, his silence filled the whole house. The heater hummed, the clock ticked, but all I heard was that uneven breathing, that fragile rhythm of a brave pup fighting to stay. I carried him to the truck again, his head resting limp on my arm, and drove straight back to Dr. Myers. The vet met us at the door, no questions asked. He took one look at Hondo and frowned. "Fever," he said, pressing his stethoscope against the small chest. "Maybe infection. We'll take care of him." I stood there uselessly, hands shaking, pretending not to be scared. But truth is, I was terrified, because I'd just gotten used to the sound of his paws in my house. I wasn't ready to lose that. Dr. Myers hooked him to an IV, wrapped him in a blanket, told me to go home and rest. I nodded, but I didn't leave. I sat on the cold tile floor beside the table, my hand resting near his paw, just close enough so he'd know I was there. He opened his eyes once, cloudy but calm, and the corner of his mouth twitched like he was trying to wag his tail without the strength. Hours passed in quiet flashes, the hum of machines, the smell of antiseptic, the steady rhythm of one tiny heart. And somewhere around midnight, I felt the smallest squeeze of his paw against my fingers. It was weak, but it was real. And I told myself that as long as he was still fighting, I would too. The vet let me take him home the next afternoon. Hondo was weak, but his eyes had that stubborn spark again, the one that never let go, even on that floating pile of roots. I carried him out to the truck like a child, his nose pressed into my shoulder, breathing slow and steady. That German Shepherd puppy wasn't healed, not yet, but he was alive, and that word suddenly felt heavier than anything I'd ever carried. Back at the house, I made a soft bed by the heater, laid him down, and watched him stretch into the warmth. He sighed, that long, tired sound of someone who's finally allowed to rest. I sat down beside him, half smiling, half afraid. You'd think I'd be used to this kind of thing after all these years, but every time it feels like handing your heart to a stranger and praying they'll keep it safe. I'm Jack Turner, 45, and I'd forgotten how quiet hope can sound. It's not shouting, it's not fireworks. It's a single breath when you thought there'd be none. That night, I fed him boiled rice and a little chicken, tiny pieces on my palm. He ate them one by one, chewing slow, looking straight into my eyes after each bite like he wanted me to know. He was trying. His tail twitched when I said his name, a barely there wag, but it was real. That small motion felt like sunrise after too many gray days. He leaned his head against my leg and closed his eyes ear-eyed, trusting sleep to take him this time. And for the first time since I pulled him from that river, I didn't feel the weight of rescue. I felt the peace of keeping something alive. When I turned off the light, the heater hummed, the wind brushed the window, and the world finally stopped rushing for a while. Hondo shifted in his sleep, nose twitching, dreaming of something better. And I realized the worst was over. But our real journey was only just beginning. Morning sunlight spilled through the curtains, warm and gold, and for a second I forgot how close I'd come to losing him. Then I heard it. Soft nails on the floor. I looked up, and there he was, walking toward me on his own. Not stumbling, not dragging, walking. That German Shepherd puppy, once too weak to lift his head, was now moving with purpose, every shaky step a quiet act of defiance. I froze, afraid that if I said something, I'd break the spell. But he saw me watching and wagged his tail, not the half-hearted flick from before, but a full, clumsy, tail-wagging celebration of life. I laughed out loud, couldn't help it. "Look at you, Hondo," I said. "You're really doing it, kid." He barked once, hoarse, broken, but proud, the first sound I'd heard from him since the river. I'm Jack Turner, 45, and I've seen miracles take 1,000 forms. Some look like bright lights and lucky timing. Others look like a small dog standing in the middle of your kitchen, tail wagging like it's rewriting the rules of what's possible. He trotted over, ears up, chest puffed, and pressed his head into my knee like it was the most natural thing in the world. That little canine didn't just survive, he decided to live. We went outside together later that day. The yard glowed green after the rain, and he ran across it for the first time, legs uneven, but spirit unshakable. The same river that nearly took him whispered in the distance, but he didn't look back. He chased a leaf, stumbled, barked again, then turned toward me with the biggest, goofiest grin. And I swear, in that one moment, the world felt like it had forgiven itself a little. I knelt down, arms open, and he ran straight into them, all fur, heart, and clumsy joy. The wind carried the sound of his happy panting across the yard, and I realized something I'll never forget. Sometimes the loudest victories come from the quietest fights, and watching that brave pup standing tall in the sunlight, that was our victory. Spring came early that year, soft and green, and Hondo had turned into something close to magic. The German Shepherd puppy who once fit in my arms now raced across the yard with a speed that made me laugh out loud. He chased wind, barked at clouds, rolled in mud like joy itself was spilling out of him. Every time he looked back at me, that same calm strength from the river was still there. But now it shined instead of trembled. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living. Every scar, every rough patch of fur, every uneven breath, they all told the same story. He made it. And in some strange way, so did I. I hadn't realized how much of my own heart had gone quiet until that brave pup decided to wake it up again. Sometimes we'd walk by the riverbank, the same one where I'd first seen him drifting on that tangle of roots. He'd pause there, nose twitching at the air, and I swear he remembered. Not with fear, with understanding. He'd glance back at me, tail swaying, eyes calm, as if to say, "It's okay now." And somehow that was enough to make peace with all of it. At 45, I've seen more endings than beginnings. But this was different. Watching that young shepherd stretch out in the grass, sun on his face, made me believe in quiet beginnings again. He'd found his place in the world, not on a piece of driftwood, not in the cold water, but here, in a yard that finally felt like home. And as I sat beside him, listening to the river murmur and the wind rustle through the trees, I realized something I hadn't in a long, long time. Sometimes the ones we rescue end up rescuing us right back. And that truth stayed with me, steady, warm, and alive, just like the little pup sleeping beside me. Sometimes I still think about the day I found him, that small shape floating in the current, fighting without knowing why. If I'd driven by 5 minutes earlier or 5 minutes later, that little German Shepherd puppy might have vanished into the river forever. But fate, or maybe just kindness, gave us both a second chance. Hondo isn't just a dog. He's proof that pain doesn't define you. It refines you. Every step he takes, every look in his eyes, reminds me that healing isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about learning that love can be louder than fear. He follows me everywhere now. The garage, the porch, the trails by the water. His loyalty isn't loud. It's steady, patient, like he's still guarding the part of me that almost gave up. And every time someone stops to pet him and asks where he came from, I just smile and say, from the river. But really, he came from hope. This little guy's journey from abandonment to rehabilitation shows how important nonprofit rescue groups really are, because every rescued puppy deserves a story that ends like his, warm, safe, loved. Caring for a rescued puppy is more than love. It's responsibility. It's pet care. And if you've ever thought one person can't make a difference, just look at a dog like Hondo and think again. If his story touched your heart, please like, comment, and share. Because sharing stories like his doesn't just spread hope, it saves lives. Join our Brave Paws family. Be their voice. Be their hope.